Welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I hope you guys can hear me and see me. Welcome to the 4th Annual Southeast Adult Autism Symposium. Before I introduce our first speaker, I want to make a few announcements. The mics for all the attendees will be muted. Panelists, please remember to mute your microphone if you're not speaking. The Q&A box is available throughout the presentation for attendees to submit questions to the presenters. The Q&A monitor will ask presenters your questions toward the end of the presentation. The chat box can also be used to communicate during the webinar. All panelists and attendees will see the text in the chat box. Please email any unanswered questions to the presenter. The presentation materials, including email addresses, are located on the GCA website at gcaspies.org. If you would like to change what you are viewing to only the speaker, you can look on the upper right-hand corner of your display and select Speaker View. The Symposium Committee would like you all to know we would have wanted to do this event in person, of course, but the change to a virtual conference was due to the COVID-19 global pandemic. So this is a first time for us doing a Zoom symposium, and we're really excited to do it today. Bear with us. I think we're going to be fine, but if we have technical issues, just be patient with us. It is now my pleasure to introduce our first presenter. Melvin R. Rodgers is presenting today on Autism and Aging, a Spiritual Care Perspective. You can go ahead and start loading your page, Melvin. Melvin, who is on the autism spectrum, works with youth and young adults on the autism spectrum in Alabama. He is an ordained minister in the United Methodist Church. He has been a pastor in Alabama, Georgia, and Texas. He is also a board-certified chaplain and pastoral counselor. He has been a pastor for 28 years and a hospital chaplain for 24 years. He has a BA in Religion and Philosophy, a Master of Divinity in Psychology of Religion / Pastoral Care and Counseling, and a Doctor of Ministry in Pastoral Counseling. He has memberships with the Association of Professional Chaplains and the Association of Clinical Pastoral Education. Go ahead, Melvin. Welcome.
Thank you, Larissa. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. It's, as you mentioned, we would love to have done this in person, but it's great that we're able to do it virtually today. So we welcome everyone for joining us, and we thank you for your participation. To begin, Autism and Aging, a Spiritual Care Perspective. When I say autism and aging, typically, or aging particularly, we in the past have done presentations on aging, and it has focused on generally as we get older and issues associated with that. But today, when I talk about autism and aging from a spiritual care perspective, I'm looking at it from a broader standpoint as young adults, or even as we grow into the later life. So it's a little broader than typically just as we get older, as some would say, the afternoon of life, but it's throughout the process. So just keep that in mind, if you will. And we will go from using that perspective. So let's look at, if you will, the learning objectives, if you will. Define spiritual care and its implications for persons on the autism spectrum. Explore some spiritual challenges faced by persons on the autism spectrum. Explore spiritual challenges, and perhaps even offer a framework for healthy aging and or spiritual well-being throughout the process. This, one of the questions, actually there are two questions that persons ask from time to time when they realize that I am on the autism spectrum and I wasn't diagnosed at a younger age. And one of the questions obviously is, how did you find out? How did you find out that you were on the autism spectrum? And generally, I talk about that in terms of that having been a process, and which is true. I discovered that my being on the autism spectrum as a part of my overall spiritual journey. And so that was a long process that got me to the point of whereas I actually discovered that recently, probably 4 years ago. And then the other question that people tend to ask is, okay, what is that like now that you know, and what's that like for you after having discovered this at this particular point in your journey? And I talk about that and describe that, talking about it as having discovered a pearl of great price. And when I use that analogy for talking about my experience, it has to do with the fact that it has been a long journey, and finding out and discovering being on the autism spectrum has been really a very fulfilling experience for me. It's been something that I've sought for many years, but not really understanding what I was looking for. So it was part of the journey, and it was a great experience. And so that's one of the ways out of my tradition that I talk about it. Notice I say a pearl of great price, not the pearl of great price, not to be confused for the pearl of great price. But it is to be talking about how powerful and exciting, fulfilling that discovery was for me as my journey went on. So it was a lifelong journey, many, many years, many decades. And at the same time, it was quite rewarding once it finally appeared. Autism spectrum. These are one of the things that I've really been excited about is all the great literature and the studies and the research that's out there that actually do a very good job of describing the challenges that we face on the autism spectrum. And this is information that I'm sure many of you are aware of, but I think it's important just to give us a background for those who may not be as familiar with it, to talk about the information and how it's described. And one of the organizations, of course, is the CDC. And this is their most recent, come from their most recent website. They talk about a developmental disability, significant social challenges, communication, behavioral. Again, that's some of the information that's out there about autism spectrum disorder as they would have us see it. And also from the CDC to talk about social and emotional challenges, communication skills, and they just actually updated, as you well know, the numbers that that individuals on the autism spectrum, which we are beginning to see those numbers creep up, and not only from them but from others as well. And also from the CDC, they talk about the signs of autism spectrum disorder, manifest themselves early in childhood and happens throughout life. Again, some of the signs, trouble relating to others, no interest in other people, avoiding eye contact. And let me just say here, during my early years, when I certainly wasn't aware of the fact of being on the autism spectrum, I can relate to many of these challenges that I'm reading about now. I'm sort of looking backward at this, at my whole journey, and which is exciting in a lot of ways, to look back at it and see that these signs clearly were there, and we just simply were not diagnosed. Again, from the CDC, repeat actions, adapting to change and routine, and trouble expressing needs with typical words, emotions. Again, as I think back and reflect back and throughout my journey, I can certainly relate to many of the challenges that we are aware of today. And again, worldwide, I looked also at the World Health Organization, who reports many of the same numbers that the CDC has. And again, it's consistent in terms of the challenges and the social behavioral type issues. These are things that are observed. And again, I do applaud the researchers, who I think have done a tremendous job of really outlining and really laying out many of the challenges that persons on the autism spectrum face. And I do want to say, and also in much of the literature also points out, is that we on the spectrum are also individuals, and so and we look at some challenges may be greater than others. Some may have certain challenges that others may not. So that's been helpful for me to understand as well, as I've not only looked at my own journey, but also worked with young people on the spectrum as well. Again, from the DSM-5, we see the challenges also, which is consistent with information that others have pointed out, which was helpful to me in a lot of ways. Like I said, there's a ton of research, as you well know, about autism spectrum disorder that's extremely helpful in understanding and getting a perspective. The DSM-5. And I think, as the DSM-5 points out, deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. I think that's sort of one of the focuses that I've had as I've looked back and as I interact with persons on the spectrum today, particularly young adults. And that seems to be one of the areas that we continue to explore. And in my own journey, I certainly can identify with that challenge as well. Again, the DSM-5, insistence on sameness, and they talks about routine as well, and ritualized patterns, and the visual fascination. And I think this quote from the CDC is one that stuck out for me and continues to do. When I first read this, I thought about this, and I actually took the liberty to have a very unscientific poll in that I asked a number of adults, young adults on the autism spectrum, sort of informally, if you had an opportunity to not be on the autism spectrum, would you change that? And to a person, I probably talked to 20, 25 people, and none of them wanted to not be on the autism spectrum. Now, there were those who pointed out that they would like not to have some of the other comorbid diagnosis that goes along with being on the autism spectrum, but actually opting out of not being on the autism spectrum. I haven't been able today to find anyone that would want that. I certainly wouldn't want that. And so that may be something interesting to continue to look at as well. And I say that with the backdrop of the CDC saying that there is no cure. Now, I also don't minimize the fact that many have some significant challenges also, many persons on the autism spectrum. But just something that stood out for me. Now, being on the autism spectrum as well, and here's something that part of the literature, in the literature, I call this a survival kit, and I have that certainly survival in quotations. But one of the things that one study talked about was camouflaging. And I also added to that, from my own experience, unwittingly camouflaging, and also retreating inward as a way of managing day-to-day life. So, if you will, a survival kit. And so when the researchers talk about camouflage, and again, a term used to describe the behavior where we hide aspects of ourselves to pass in everyday interactions. And camouflaging has been proposed as a common experience of autistic people in their navigation of the non-autistic world. So how do we cope? How do we get by? Camouflaging. And in this study that was done in 2019, one of the most common themes that people pointed out for camouflaging was to fit in a neurotypical world. So in essence, we hide aspects of who we are in order to fit in. Another theme was to avoid retaliation or bullying, was a theme from the study as well. And still another was concerned about the impression that they would make if they were not camouflaged. And so so the suggestion is that I hide aspects of who I am in order to fit in a neurotypical world. I avoid bullying by hiding aspects of who I am. And I also, avoid persons having negative impressions of me by pretending and/or by hiding aspects of who I am. Now, when I talk about unwittingly camouflage, and it certainly gets pretty personal for me in this area as well, I talk about it in terms of the fact that it speaks to persons who have not been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, yet experience many, if not all, of the challenges and the social challenges that person on the autism spectrum does. And so in this context, life can be defined by misconnections, just as persons who are diagnosed. Confusion can be a common theme in trying to understand and with the lack of challenges related to communication. There can be a persistent lack of meaning with the individual as well. Unwittingly camouflage, and also comes about when one concludes that obviously something is wrong with me. So it's essentially internalized, and looking at the neurotypical world, one can take the position that it's something wrong with me. And so therefore I must observe, I must notice, and I must understand and learn how to be so that this challenge will no longer exist. So the other part of this survival kit has to do with retreating inward. To retreat inward is to abandon the quest for meaningful social interaction with others And this can also include anguish and despair once this is done. And by retreating inward, it can create negative personal narrative because I'm internalizing and I'm thinking and I'm feeling as though, again, there's something wrong with me. So I will retreat inward and I will avoid perhaps the pain. It can also cause social distress, spiritual distress. In this sense of retreating inward, it's not a spiritual practice, but it is an escape and it's a denial, a masking of the social needs that one may have. In other words, it's like saying, I don't need friends. I don't need to interact. I don't need to engage. I don't need the connections. And we retreat inward. As with any of the responses in social difficulties, whether it's camouflaging, whether it's unwittingly camouflaging, or whether it's retreating inward, self-medication is always on the table. It's always possible to try and cover up the pain and the distress by medicating ourselves to avoid the pain. To retreat inward, it often limits the flow of information needed to assess situations and individuals in a healthy way. It also limits our experience with nature, individual, and it disrupts the awareness of the flow of time. It's very easy to lose track of how our life is progressing when we retreat inward. While retreating inward may help in some way to pacify us, there is little or no chance for social cohesion when we do so. So that's part of the challenge of it when we retreat inward. So the spiritual, the challenge of camouflaging and unwittingly camouflaging, retreating inward, creates and can wreak havoc on the individual's self-esteem. One of the studies showed that we see people who are experiencing depression, self-esteem issues as well. So, because what we're doing actually is denying aspects of our humanity, denying who we are, which has a damaging effect. So spiritual care. Spiritual care is the establishment of a relationship that gives attention to the internal experience of the person or persons. And the aim of this relationship is healing, which is characterized by radical reunion of mind, body, and spirit. The byproduct of this mystical union is inner peace. So this is where I think spiritual care becomes so critical to persons in general, and especially for persons on the autism spectrum. It focuses on the building of relationships. It focuses on healing that brings the whole person back together, that enables an individual to embrace who we are, mind, body, and spirit. Spiritual care. Spiritual care, it helps in providing meaning. It provides meaning. It undermines suffering, and it spawns hope. And I certainly can see and value this aspect of caring, just in providing meaning. And when, as Frankl often said, when we find meaning, we eliminate suffering. And spiritual care's focus is one of the main focuses of spiritual care is to provide meaning. So in talking about spiritual care and talking about spiritual care, I think it's helpful to look at religion as a broad term, religion. And we understand religion, and from a sociological standpoint, when we talk about religion and describing religion, we think about it as a system of beliefs and practice relative to sacred things. So in describing religion, it's a system of organized beliefs and worships and patterns. And the religion is the externals of one's belief system. It is the church, prayer, tradition, rituals, among other things. And religion is thought of as the institution. And we participate in this institution when we think about religion itself in a broad way. Another aspect of religion is belief in supernatural powers and forces. And it's about getting into a favorable relationship with this power. It is a system of beliefs and values that explain the mysteries of life and gives answer to theological questions. Again, this broad concept of religion. And one of the things that I want to note too is that when we talk about religion, we're talking about religion in terms of it being pro-social, and which makes it challenging in some ways for individuals who struggle with social interaction. Because when you think about participation in the church or organizations, a great deal of their participation has to do with how we function socially, how we interact with each other. Do we understand the social cues, the languages? Can we understand nonverbal cues? So the institution, when we talk about religion as institution, the pro-social aspect becomes critical. I would argue, point out even the success or the ability to be comfortable or to engage successfully within the religious organization is tied very closely to how well we are able to interact socially. And in some cases, one can be rejected for not having these social cues, not understanding these social cues. Spirituality. Now, we take a little bit different, and I will say in all fairness, there is a conversation going on within religion and theology as to whether or not we should look at spirituality aside from religion. But then there are also those of us who believe that spirituality is a different component whatsoever that can be inclusive of religion, but does not have to be. In other words, we can have spirituality without religion. And spirituality is defined as the core of one's humanity. It's a way of being. It's a way of experiencing life. It's a transcendent dimensions. It provides ultimate meaning. Actually, it's the life force, it's energy. It can be that which exists within nature. So spirituality, when we think of spirituality, we think of it as a broad concept that does not have to include a religious tradition, but that it is before and it is broader than religion itself. Again, more on spirituality. It speaks to what gives ultimate meaning, purpose. It is that part of one's life that seeks healing, reconciliation with others, the universe, and ultimate reality. And is often a broad concept referring to the human search for meaning, purpose, morality in the context of relationship with others, the universe, and ultimate reality. And as Frankel once said, at its most basic level, spirituality can be seen as that very essence which we all as human beings have. It brings meaning to our life as well. Now, let's look at some spiritual challenges that, that we on the autism spectrum particularly can sometimes experience. And I talk about this and I say, finding a sense of belonging / community. I connect those two, and it can be challenging to find a sense of belonging or community. And when I talk about that place of belonging, it's a place where one can be challenged without being humiliated. One can be corrected without being degraded. One can be embraced without being crippled. There's a sense to which we can embrace an individual, a community can embrace an individual without being crippled, without being actually crippled. And community, a feeling of fellowship with others that results from the sharing of common attitudes and interests. And I think this quote, this proverb actually speaks to the child within a community, the child and the community, that it takes a village to raise a child. And I think this is the quote actually that goes along, the proverb that actually goes along with it, which also points out the importance of the village to the child's development. That if a child is not embraced by the village, he will burn it down to feel its warmth. It speaks to the need of the child and the importance of the community. A sense of community or a sense of belonging is about acceptance, about empathic understanding, positive regard, to feel this within community. A sense of belonging or community is not merely being in the presence of others, it is being present in the presence of others. The whole person being able to be present and to not feel the need to camouflage, not feel the need to hide aspects of who we are, but can be in the presence of others, be present in the presence of others. It's a place of safety where one finds direction and assurance. And there is a calming experience that comes from a sense of belonging, that there's something calming or peaceful about that. It's a place of nurturing. It provides a context for meaning and values. And it's a place where the unfolding human potential can take place within this safe community. And let's talk also about the spiritual resources. I think, and it's something that I've been reflecting on as well from the standpoint of now being on the spectrum. And within it all, and one of the things that, the ways I describe it is to talk about resilience and to raise the issue of resilience. And for me, as I look at resilience, and I say resilience is what hope looks like. Because when there is this dimension of resilience, there is tremendous possibilities embedded in that experience of the individual. So resilience. The capacity to maintain effective psychological behavioral adjustments in the face of factors that normally put individuals at risk of poor adjustment. Now, if you fail to appreciate the experience of the individual, particularly the person on the autism spectrum, one can dismiss this whole idea of resilience altogether. But I still raise resilience as something that we on the spectrum possess tremendously. And the ability to recover or adjust easily to misfortune or change, the ability to be happy, successful, and so forth again after something difficult has happened. Talking about, still, again, resilience. Now, we're just getting to sort of, at least in my study, in my research, where we're seeing material on resilience as it relates to persons on the autism spectrum. And that's exciting to see. It's early in the process, seemingly. There's a great deal of literature about resilience of parents or caregivers of persons on the autism spectrum, which rightfully so, because we see and we are aware that caregivers and parents face some difficult challenges and do an extremely great job of caring for persons on the autism spectrum. And so to talk about resilience as related to parents or caregivers is certainly appropriate. But I also think it's equally as appropriate, if not more so, to consider resilience for the person on the autism spectrum as well. Because if we give too much attention to what the challenges are, and if we start with merely the challenges of the person on the spectrum inability to do this or to cope or to adjust, and with their insistence on sameness, with the communication challenges, all of these things, that's helpful information. But I think sometimes it can set us up for not seeing what is possible as well. So if we give too much attention to what the challenges are without putting equally the attention on what's possible, we can miss the opportunities as well. And I think resilience is one of those things that we often fail to realize. So this particular study that points out simply that, and it defines resilience in terms of, it's primarily defined as a process that is dynamic and modifiable, that changes and that grows over time when we look at resilience. It's the capacity of a dynamic system to withstand or recover. And so, and as I pointed out, the authors of the study points suggest that there is very little work done. We've not really explored resilience in persons on the autism spectrum as we should. And one of the reasons that this study suggests for that is that it's a process that you have to look at over a long period of time. You have to study it not just as a child or as a child or adolescent, but you have to follow the person throughout the lifespan to really get a great idea of what resilience looks like and what is possible with resilience. Again, another study on resilience, which is consistent with the other, and suggesting that there needs to be more study. There needs to be more in terms of looking at resilience in persons on the autism spectrum. And the key thing about it, both studies, was that they pointed out that it's a dynamic process. It's a process that even in neurotypical children, it changes. And the resilience it grows and is able to expand and throughout the person's lifespan. And so when we take a look at it, we can see that a person is able to adapt and learn how to adapt and grow, and it expands. Again, though, if we're locked into an early diagnosis of what's not possible, sometimes it prevents us from being able to see a process unfold. When I think about the spectrum, autism spectrum, and I look at perhaps putting forth just some ideas or a framework for growing and for aging, regardless as to where we are, I think of Carl Jung and his work on aging. And when I first encountered him early in my career, I thought I was normal. And I looked at his work based upon being normal. And so by unwittingly camouflaging, I was able to gain a degree of resonance and was able to appreciate his work and still find it very valuable. Now, with the benefit of knowing that I'm on the autism spectrum, I look back at his work. I look back at his work and see how it speaks to me at this point. And he offered these 7 tasks for aging that have been with me for a while, and I reflect on them now based upon being on the autism spectrum as opposed to not having the benefit of that knowledge. And one of the things that he says, facing the reality of aging and dying. And I come from that by saying, look in the mirror often. And not from a position of vanity, perhaps, but just simply looking and getting in contact with oneself. And one of the things that I began to do when I was diagnosed about 4 years ago was to really experience my body in ways in which I had not before. I began to look at myself in the mirror, look in my own eyes. And it was a process of self-discovery. And the other thing that I found myself doing and find myself doing even now is reminding myself to be still, reminding myself to stop several times a day and experience who I am and get to know who I am from a different perspective. And also, Hume talks about a life review and looking at one's life. And to this, I respond, listen with my mind, body, and spirit. Hear myself. Pay attention to myself. Take myself serious and grow to understand who I am. I talks about validating my own experience often, my own feelings. And also, I talk about celebrating as a routine experience. celebrating who I am and where I am.
Melvin, 15 minutes.
He talks about defining life realistically. I give myself permission to grieve. I reminded myself that grace is mine. And I see forgiveness as a constant companion. He talks about letting go of the ego. And I tell myself, reflect on the source of my motivations. What is it that motivates me? And I also remind myself to keep loving. And I also remind myself to keep setting healthy boundaries for myself. Thune talks about finding a new rooting in the self. To this, I remind myself that my instincts may not always be correct, but they should never be ignored. I also say, hope without shame. Search with courage. He talks about determining the meaning of one's life. And I remind myself to seek greater integration of mind, body, and spirit, and into community. To commune with nature often, to trust my instincts. He talks about rebirth and dying with life. And I remind myself to rediscover the joy of being, redevelop the ability to laugh alone, and rediscover the freedom of playing alone as a way of celebrating who I am as a person, as an adult on the autism spectrum. So, a developmental disability, yes, there are social challenges, communication challenges. No, there is no cure. Camouflaging, unwittingly camouflaging, retreating inward. Spiritual care provides meaning and comfort. Spirituality the spiritual challenge, finding a sense of belonging. But the community, if a child is not embraced by the village, he will burn it down to feel its warmth. Resilience is the ability to recover from or adjust to misfortunes. Persons on the autism spectrum possess great resilience that is nurtured over time. A few references, if you will. Thank you.
All right, are we ready for some Q&A?
Yes.
Okay, we had some questions here. Who's reading our questions today?
That would be me.
Hello, Nancy.
Hello, Melvin. Hello, Larissa.
Hey, Nancy.
So we had a question from Lori Burmeister. Not sure. Okay.
I can pull it up.
I found it. I just wondered why it got moved. Lori says, in my experience as a professional working with adults with ASD, I have seen a preponderance of individuals following the tenets of Buddhism and eschewing Christianity. And she asked, Melvin, have you seen this? And what do you make of it?
Well, thank you for the question. And I think I would agree. And what I think about that is that the religions that are heavily social, in the sense that tend to probably focus more intently upon the social or the interactions, I think persons on the autism spectrum find that more challenging. And the ones that tend to focus more on spirituality or the inward experience, I think are more attractive to persons on the autism spectrum. Buddhism, for example, is probably that religion that we equate more with spirituality than any other religion. So it is not surprising that persons on the spectrum would find it more attractive simply because of that. That doesn't mean that Christianity doesn't have aspects of spirituality. It's just simply that probably often you see the religious or the social aspect that gets more attention.
Thanks, Melvin.
Okay.
This is a comment from Chris Roberts, but they say that they made the comment that it's very interesting that you're discussing the internal parts of autistic persons when most definitions target the external parts. And I thought that was interesting too. You know, nobody cares what's going on inside of us. They just care about how we behave.
And I certainly can understand that the clinicians, you know, sort of focus on behavioral adjustment. I have respect for the behavioral model of therapy, and I think it's helpful and necessary. I also think, however, that spiritual care and spirituality's focus is the internal experience. So I think it's not either or, it's probably both and. I remember my experience with a therapist being diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. And it was clear to me that he found focusing on the internal experience very uncomfortable. He was more comfortable talking about the exterior or the behavioral aspect of it, and rather than to really focus on the internal experience, which is necessary. And so that's one of the reasons why persons on the autism spectrum have a difficult time finding a sense of belonging and community, and tend to go inward, because nobody will, I mean, I won't say no one, but it's difficult to find persons who will address that internal experience. And that's kind of where many of us are most of the time.
We have one of our other speakers who wanted to ask you a question.
Sure.
Verbally. So this is Daniel Durrani, and he wants to ask his question verbally.
Hi, Melvin.
Hey.
Hi, Melvin.
Yeah.
Melvin, you talked about masking.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it common for neurotypicals just as well as folks on the spectrum to mask because you're masking because you don't want people to reveal, you don't want to reveal everything to, and also, is it more common in girls to mask than guys who are on the spectrum? And doesn't it become harder to detect someone who's on the spectrum as well?
Okay, yeah, they pointed out to suggest that, yeah, I think there are certainly neurotypicals mask as well. However, I would probably suggest that the quality of it is probably different. I think that one of the things that the study points out is that when persons on the spectrum mask, it's the severity of the survival need is greater. In the sense
5 minutes. Sorry to interrupt. 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, the severity of the survival needs is greater. I mean, it's not. There's much more psychological damage being done to the person on the spectrum who's masking than the neurotypicals who do it. They may do it sort of casually. They may do it not a big loss, but when a person on the autism spectrum does it, a lot is being put on the line, if not physically, certainly psychologically. And the study pointed out that probably we do see just as many girls as opposed to guys masking as well. So yeah, we do see that. It didn't point out a distinction between the numbers that I saw, but certainly both do it. They may have slightly different reasons. They may focus on different reasons, but it's done by both, and it's equally as damaging to both. Mm-hmm. Guys may tend sometimes to take a more macho perspective, or and say, I'm not going to do this, or may become more adamant about not doing it, about even more aggressive in some cases, but we do see it happening there as well.
Melvin, we have one more question. Nancy, can you give the other?
Yeah, I was going to do that. This was a question from Nathan. What made you decide to be a preacher?
Well, again, a long journey, but it was a part of the spiritual journey of searching. Certainly, probably happened in my late 20s, early 30s. And so, but the search for trying to understand and search for knowledge began earlier than that. So it's part of the journey itself of searching, and it's where I ended up, and probably influenced by some people in my life that I met along the way as well.
I bet you could do a whole talk just on that, right?
Yeah, that's it's a long journey.
I also have a question for you, unless there's another question from one of the attendees. It's all right if I go ahead and ask.
Yeah, that was all of the Q&A.
Okay, I have a question for you, Melvin, too. Fascinating discussion, by the way. So my son is autistic, and he's 19. And
I remember
so and so his journey and my journey have been very different, different generations and certain, different genders and so on, but we're extremely similar. And you were talking about resilience, and this is something that I find that is a difference between us, is that I have somehow, I don't know how, cultivated a great deal of resilience in my lifetime. I don't know how I did it. There are certainly times when I've been in dark places, but I always somehow manage to figure out something to get back on track. I think he's capable of that, but he sort of has, at this point in his life, just kind of thrown up his hands and said, well, I'm depressed, I'm autistic, and you can just like push him over with a feather. And I'm like, come on, you gotta do something to get yourself into a better place here. And I think he realizes that. He's 19, but So I was wondering, in your experience, like, what have you noticed about people who develop that sense of resilience versus people who struggle more with that? And like, what maybe life experiences or internal qualities do they have that would make a difference there.
Yeah, and I guess I speak from someone who was not diagnosed until 4 years ago. So we're talking 64 years, 63 years of not even knowing that autism even existed, certainly for me. So, and so and as you pointed out about yourself, I just think that sometimes, we deprive young people of the opportunity to figure things out or to make mistakes. I made a ton of mistakes, the things that I look at now, but all of that was sort of the making of me. And that's what these latest studies on resilience is pointing out, and that it's something that happens over a process and a period of time. And everyone suggests that we just need to study resilience more in individuals, which is a lifespan process. If we get locked up into the early diagnosis of what we can't do or what we're not supposed to be able, we're not supposed to be able to adapt. We're supposed to have this insistence on sameness. We're supposed to do this, then we sort of stay there. And so I think that having had the opportunity to just to make mistakes and to go along, to figure it out, which sounds like that's what you did. You figured it out. And I think that kids have this. Now, obviously personalities are different, but I think we have this. And I think that we will do that. I think we don't give them an opportunity or to do that as much. But so that's sort of my response from my own experience of because it certainly hadn't looked pretty with me for 64 years, for sure. It's got pretty ugly, because when you said he was 19, I thought back to being 19. And I tell you, it was a challenging time. But again, not knowing that I was on the spectrum, I figured it out. It worked out.
Yeah. This is something to consider for sure. Yeah, I would love to talk to you about this some more.
Yeah.
If I get a chance to, I would love to. Sure. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. We are going into our break time just a little bit, but it's a nice long break. So we will be coming back for 1:15, or I'm sorry, for 1:30 for our next presentation by Catie Thune. Thank you so much, Melvin. And I hope you don't mind. I'm actually interested in reaching out to you. If I'm sure some of the attendees will be as well. So your email address can be found on the gcaspies.org website if anybody wants to reach out to you. So thank you so much, Melvin, and we'll go into our break now.
Great.
Maybe. Oh, there it is. There we go. I hope you all had a nice break. We are here with our second speaker, Catie Thune. And let me just pull up her bio so I can tell you all about her before she gets started here. Just a couple of reminders. The Q&A box is being monitored for questions all through the presentation. So if you have questions at any point, go ahead and write them in the Q&A box, and then they will be brought up towards the end of the presentation during the Q&A section. Please email any unanswered questions to the presenter. The presentation materials and the email addresses will be on gcaspes.org. And Catie, if you want to, if you have a presentation, I'll start introducing you here if you want to go ahead and start pulling that up. This is Catie Thune, presenting on safe and healthy relationships for all. And Catie is an educator, author, and advocate for people with disabilities. She has her teaching license in health education and special education K through 12, as well as her MA in education. And she worked as a teacher in the public school system for 12 years. She has done extensive curriculum writing on relationships and sexuality education. Welcome, Catie.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It seems like things are going so smoothly, which is wonderful. So great. Well, just a little bit about me before we really get into this. So my name is Catie, and my background in education, I was, as Larissa said, I was a teacher. Middle school was what I taught for most of my years in the school. So got to see all those fun hormones and puberty changes and good stuff, which was really fun. 7 years ago is when I left, and that's when I started doing a lot of curriculum writing for myself and our own programs, as well as other organizations like Special Olympics or the Autism Society of Minnesota and other organizations. So it's been a fun, wild ride these past 7 years. I do have one other person on the call with us today. Her name is Leah Bauman-Smith. And oh, good, there's her video. So she is there, and so if she might add things here and there, or you can also send her private messages if you'd like to do that, and send questions and things to her. So she's a part of my team. She has a teaching background as well, and is just a really awesome person. So with that, I just want to make sure that we put up these agreements so that we all know that this is a non-judgmental, safe space. Obviously, you're participating at your own comfort level. So you can send questions and comments to Leah. You could, just let us know that you have a question or whatever. So do what you need to do. And of course, just take care of yourself today for this next hour that we're together. If you need to go to the bathroom, if you need to stand up and move, take some breaths, do what you need to do. I did just put this slide up here just in case, so you can see Leah's name there. So you can send a private question to her if you'd like to do that. Just choose your own adventure with questions and stuff. Or you can send it to the whole group. My plan is this will be a mix of us chatting a little bit. I have a couple videos that we're gonna watch. We'll of course have time at the end for questions, but all the way through, ask questions as things come up for you, or if you wanna share things. So with that, I would like to start us out with a little breathing activity. So in this picture, you can see this is a breathing sphere that we use in a lot of our classes and workshops. We know that sexual health and relationships and boundaries and safety, and it can bring up a lot of feelings for people. And so we just want to make sure that we're all starting in a calm space together. So we're going to take 5 deep breaths together using the breathing sphere. You can see in my video there. So what we'll do right now is we'll take a deep inhale through the nose and let it out, nose or mouth. 4 more. Breath in. Breath out. Two more. Inhale. Exhale. And one last breath, the deepest breath yet today. Hold it and then let it go. Nice. All right. So hopefully, you know, a lot of you have been on this for several hours now. And so hopefully now you've been able to let a couple things go. And just remember to go back to your breathing if anything comes up as we go through today. A few things just to get our minds in the right space right now as we move into the topic of safe and healthy boundaries and relationships. Remembering that we are all sexual beings. All humans are sexual beings, and we show it in different ways. But that is what we are. Some people identify as asexual, but that does not mean that they are not a sexual being. And it doesn't mean that they don't have relationships and friendships and also boundaries. And so we're all in this together with that. We also know that sex ed can bring up feelings, and so things might come up for you today. So I'm just going to remind you one more time, take breaths as you need them. Stand up, walk around, move, turn away from the screen. Just do what you need to do as we move through this together. We know that sex ed is a lifelong process. A lot of us in the past have had maybe a 5th grade conversation on puberty, you know, in the schools. It's that one and done conversation. Oh, okay, we've talked about it. Now you know everything there is. And we know that's not the case. As adults, all of us on this call today, we all are learning about ourselves as sexual beings today. And then tomorrow it's going to be a little bit different. The next day it's a little bit different. So this is a lifelong process. 10 years from now, it's going to be different. 10 years ago, it was very different. And so just to remember, we're always learning. Also, none of us are perfect. Leah and I talk about this a lot. We often put our foot in our mouth and say the wrong thing at the wrong time, but then we just apologize and move on and try again next time. So we, you know, just so we remember that we want to start having more and more of these conversations so that we can work through this together. And of course, the last, so important, everyone has different boundaries. We have different boundaries with different people, with different moods in our life, in different scenarios, in different locations. When there's a pandemic, there are different boundaries all the time. And so with those things, I'm gonna show you some activities that, and some videos as we go through this, just to think about some of the different topics having to do with boundaries and relationships. So with that, I'm going to start with this one, unless there's any questions as we get started. Are we good? Cool. Okay. I'm showing this. This is a worksheet, a handout, an activity that we use in a lot of our classes. It's kind of a silly little categorization thing, but it can be really helpful. So we know that a relationship is a connection between 2 or more people. We have relationships with all kinds of people in our lives. And this is a tool that could be helpful to sort of categorize the different people and how they fit into our lives. And so I know sometimes people that I have had conversations with struggle with the difference between who are the professional relationships and who are my friends. And so it's really important that we remember that not every coworker needs to be a friend. A coworker is a professional relationship. Some of them might be friends. Most of them probably are just professional relationships. You know, when I was a teacher, I was friends with a couple other teachers at the school, but most everybody else was just a professional relationship. In the romantic partner category, it's really important we remember that all parties involved are aware that they are also in that category. So this is not a place where we would put someone that we have a crush on. Crushes are great, and we have them all the time. And you can have a crush on anyone in any of these categories. We don't have control over who we have a crush on. But it's really important that we don't put the crush in the romantic partner category unless it turns into a romantic relationship that is consensual and both parties are a part of. The public category, this is just maybe some neighbors would go in there, maybe people like movie stars, celebrities, there are people in the public, community workers, the clerk at the grocery store, things like that, that would be in the public category. So once we kind of have categorized all these different people in our lives and where they fit, knowing that this changes from year to year, we're not always going to have the same people in these categories. 5 years ago, I had different people in my friend category than I do today. So that does change. But once we think about that, we can move to this next thing where we think about the different types of touch. Another visual just to think about how the different types of touch or gestures, types of affection that we use with different people in our lives. So let's say we have someone in our hug circle. It's really important that we remember that just because they're in our hug circle, it doesn't mean that we give them a hug every single time that you see them. For example, right now we're in a pandemic. There's not a lot of hugging with anyone. So I have lots of people that I might have in my hug circle that I don't hug right now because we're really not supposed to get that close to people. So just something to remember that this will change from day to day. It'll change from week to week. It'll change with our mood. If I'm crabby, I might not have anybody in my hug circle. This might change from location to location. So I might have a different relationship circle for the workplace. And then I might have a different relationship circle for out in the community or at home. So we really need to think about the different types of touch that we're using with the different people in our lives. And you can see on this, we say side hug, but other types of touch similar to side hug could also be things like a pat on the back, something like that, or a shoulder squeeze or something like that. In the shake hands circle, other types of touch might be things like a fist bump or a high five, elbow bump, something like that. And in the wave circle, those are other things that are just not touch. So things like peace sign, yeah, or salute or thumbs up or smiling at people, anything like that. And the do not touch, so that's really important that we remember that there are times where we don't need to touch or gesture or wave or smile or anything at anyone. If you're not feeling it, that's okay. I mean, if you walk into a job interview, it's really important that you greet the person. So that's not the type of person that would go in the do not touch circle. But if you get on a bus, for example, you don't need to say hello or smile at everyone on the bus. You can just get on the bus and sit down, and that's great. So now shifting a little bit, thinking about, when we're talking about touch, it goes both ways, right? It's really important that we remember that both people need to agree to the type of touch that we're doing. And so I want us to think a little bit about that word consent. And consent is just when it's agreeing to something, agreeing to a certain activity or agreeing to a behavior or a type of touch. And when we talk about consent, we talk about these 3 rules: ask, listen, respect. And we need to make sure that all 3 rules are in place in order for consent to actually be happening. I mean, if we ask someone for a hug and we don't listen to their answer, we just give them a hug right away. Hey, can I have a hug? And then you give them a hug. That's not following the rules. We need to ask them and listen to what they say. And if they say no, we need to respect that. So I know also some people might ask, listen to the answer, but if it's a no, they still give them the hug. So they're not really listening to the answer, or they listened, but they're not really respecting the answer. So we just need to make sure that all 3 of those are in place when we're talking about consent in anything, whether it be about movies, figuring out which movie to watch or what type of touch to use or where to go or something like that. I'm going to show you a video with this, and we'll also share the links to these videos with you after you'll have all of this.
Hey, Leah, let's talk about consent. So what does consent mean to you in relationships? I think about consent, I think about
Second. Here we go.
enthusiastic yes. Both people in the relationship are saying yes and they're excited. And consent can be about all types of activities in the relationship, whether it's sexual activity, just making plans together, and that both people agree on the status of the relationship. Yeah, so it's all about agreement. And I've also heard, though, that sometimes no means no, but yes doesn't always mean yes. I'm thinking about like body language and how sometimes someone might say yes, but their body language is closed off and telling me no, they're unsure. What else do you know about that? Also, things to think about are peer pressure and power dynamics. Is the person much older than you, or maybe is your boss? That can be a power dynamic. Or peer pressure. Are both people really consenting because they want to, or because someone's pressuring them? That's really helpful. Thanks, Leah. Thanks.
All right. Second. Here we go. All right. So a couple things from that I just want to make sure that I mention and that we think a little bit about is when Anna was talking about body language and how sometimes yes doesn't always mean yes. And so if we have these 3 rules here, ask, listen, respect. So we ask, we listen to the answer, and if they say yes, then we would think, oh, well, okay, we're respecting that. We're going to give the hug or we're going to do whatever. But what she mentioned in there is the body language. And this is where things can get so tricky. And we really need to think about what we're doing and watching and being in these relationships. Because if someone really is closed off and they're saying yes to the hug or whatever type of touch, but they're closed and they're looking down, that might actually be a no, or I'm not so sure I'm comfortable with this. And so then we might want to ask again or follow up with a different question, you know, something like, ooh, it kind of looks like you really don't want that hug. Are you sure you're okay with me giving you a hug? And seeing if their answer changes. Or maybe just not giving the hug or doing the type of touch because you're not sure if that person really is agreeing to that activity or behavior. I'm wondering, well, the other thing that I was going to say, but then I'm also wondering if there's any questions about consent. I mean, we have a few more things we're moving into, but specifically about this. But I do want to make sure I also mention that in the video, Leah and Anna talked a little bit about power dynamics. And so sometimes, like, I think about if the person is your boss or a staff person or a leader or someone in power, it's maybe just best not to have that type of behavior with that person. And so we need to think about it because we can sometimes feel that pressure, or the other person can feel the pressure if we're a person in power to them. This also, one last thing that I just want to mention with consent, and then if you have questions, that's great. But I just want to make sure that I mention that this consent is with all types of relationships. So really important that, I mean, we're talking about not just sexual behavior. That's a really big piece of consent, but this is about friendships, about work relationships, about community relationships, and of course, romantic relationships. So all of these things. Are there any questions? Leah, did anyone send a question? Or I'm just wondering if there's anything else that you want to add that I don't want to forget anything.
I did share that other consent video with the 2 teens.
Oh, great.
On the date, just in the chat box. So if people want to copy that link, it's a sweet short video about consent, but helpful for kind of that middle school, high school age.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Yeah, that's great. So feel free to watch that one. It's a good one. And it shows 2 teens actually consenting, saying no, saying yes to different types of behavior. So kind of shows it in consent in action, which is really nice. Consent, you know, it takes practice to do this, and try not to be so hard on yourself. If you agree to something and then you're like, oh, I really didn't want to agree on it, it's okay to back away. It's okay to then say no the next time. Just because we're agreeing to a certain thing with someone doesn't mean that we're agreeing to that behavior all the time. So take care of yourself and do what's comfortable for you, making sure you're listening to your body. What is your heart telling you? What is your mind telling you? If something in your body is feeling like this isn't what I should be doing, then you probably shouldn't be doing that. So we talk about a full body yes. If it's not a full body yes, then it's a no. If some part of me doesn't feel comfortable with this, then it's a no, and that's okay. So with that, I'm going to shift, move forward, thinking about a little bit more about boundaries and consent and taking care of ourselves and our bodies. And we have some videos and on some safety rules that we think about. And with these safety rules, we talk about how the rule number 1 is my body belongs to me. No one gets to touch me unless I say it's okay. My body belongs to me. My body belongs to me. I think this is just something that is so important that we all remember. It doesn't matter who, if it's a doctor, a parent, no one gets to touch me, right? My romantic partner. My body is mine. Body rights, body autonomy, my body belongs to me. And I want you, when you leave this today, just that is like, if you take anything away from it, it's that. That's what I want you to remember. My body belongs to me. No one gets to touch me unless I say it's okay. I'm going to show you a video and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. The video that I'm going to show you was filmed with actors. So this specific situation did not happen to these people. However, these situations happen, and that's why we're going to watch this. And I just want to remind you, if something in the video makes you feel uncomfortable, take a breath. That's okay. The video we're going to see takes place on a city bus, and you will notice many uncomfortable situations leading up to a very inappropriate type of touch. So I'm going to play this.
Excuse me. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Well, sure is crowded today. So what's a pretty girl like you sitting all alone for? Well, sure is hot in here. Oh, sorry.
No, my body belongs to me. Sir, that creep touched me.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. We'll get it called in here. 1547 to base.
1547 is dispatch. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've got a 1099 here.
We are sending officers to your location.
10-4. They're on their way to help us, okay?
Thank you.
All right. So with that, I guess right now, I just want you to take a deep breath in and let it out. And just take a moment to think about some of the feelings that you have right now. If you want to share them in the chat box, feel free. Just thinking about what you are feeling. And a few things I want to note is one, I want to mention that she did a lot of very healthy things in this video leading up to the very inappropriate kind of touch. So she didn't talk to him. That was one thing I noticed. I also noticed she moved away from him. That was another thing. And then, of course, at the end, she totally did the great thing, the right thing. She pulled the thing and she got off and she went and told the bus driver. Another thing I do want to mention is that, if we respond in that appropriate way at the end and we tell someone, they might not always believe us, right? The situation with this bus driver might not be the end scenario for everyone. And I think that's another important thing to remember, is just because we do the right thing and we tell someone, it might not work. So then it's really important that we think about telling another person. And if that person doesn't believe us, then we tell another person. So we don't just give up and say, well, I guess it's just too bad that happened. So just kind of thinking as we move forward, like how you might use some of these healthy behaviors that you saw in your life, in situations that you encounter. And so feel free to share in the chat box, but also I just want you to think about that. Like, what is something that you could do? And it might not be a situation on a city bus. It might be something totally different, but we know that sometimes this happens where people get into our space and we're not comfortable with them being in our space. We don't want that. And it's okay to say no. It's really, really important to say no. So this is one of the safety rules that we have. The other safety rules that we have, one is remembering that private behaviors are for private places. I think that's really important that we remember that we can't do private behaviors in public spaces. We have to be in a private space. So like in our bedroom or bathroom at home. The other safety rules that we have are to say no to anything that makes us feel uncomfortable or makes us feel uneasy, to get away. That's another one of our safety rules and really important. And sometimes it can be really tricky to get away from something that makes us feel uncomfortable, and it might not work right away. And then the last safety rule is to tell someone. And I think this first and last one, my body belongs to me, and to tell someone, those are two of the most important ones. And just to remember that you're not in this alone, and that there's a lot of people out there that believe you. So before I move forward, any questions that have come up or anything that anyone wants to share? Leah didn't.
Yeah, in the chat box, there's been a little bit of conversation just about that, like, she was very obviously uncomfortable even kind of before he like touched her, and that he was obviously a predator who was, just so we know, he's actually a very nice man. But in the video,
they're actors, remember, actors.
Yeah. I know, I felt bad being like, yes, he's a predator. He's also a kind man. But in the video, that we know that people who are predators or have those kind of predatory behaviors or inability to have safe boundaries, we know that they do kind of prey on people who might seem like they maybe would have a hard time getting away, or that maybe wouldn't have the same support system to tell somebody, or they wouldn't be able to stick up for themselves. So we do know that is a problem, that we see that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to keep on going. So from here, I want you to start thinking about your relationships that you have, and friendships, coworker relationships, family relationships, romantic relationships, just all kinds of relationships. And this is a tool, I'm going to just share a couple tools with you that could be helpful for you to think about some of the behaviors in the relationships that you have. And so this is just a tool that you could use thinking about what are some healthy behaviors, what are things that you want in a relationship, and what are some unhealthy or things that you don't want in relationships. So examples of some of these things might be healthy behaviors, might be things like compliments, sharing compliments, being kind, asking for permission, asking for consent, all of those types of things. Unhealthy behaviors in relationships might be things like no consent, being forceful, pressuring someone, talking behind someone's back, gossiping, unkind words, things like that. Those are all unhealthy. So just kind of thinking that. Now, after you've created those lists, then it can be helpful to maybe make a different list for different types of relationships. So there's also one in here on the next one here. This one says romantic relationships. So you could think about different types of behaviors that you want or don't want, healthy or unhealthy, in your romantic relationships. And then maybe making another one for coworker relationships or work relationships or professional relationships. Maybe making another one for community relationships or friendships, family members. It can be helpful to think through all these different types of things. I know that this is sometimes when we think about healthy and unhealthy with school relationships, sometimes we would put something like hugs on the unhealthy side. Well, hugs can be very healthy, but in a school setting, maybe not as healthy. Maybe we want to make sure that in a school setting that hugs, or in a work setting that hugs, stay on the unhealthy side. And then maybe in family or community relationships that they could be on the healthy side. So just kind of nice to think through some of those relationships and behaviors in those relationships. And it can be tricky to think about what we actually do want in a relationship. So this could be an activity that you maybe want to do with another person, because sometimes it's hard to come up with them all by yourself and just think about, I don't know what I really want in a relationship. I don't know what's healthy or unhealthy. Another activity could be watching a show or a sitcom on TV or a movie or something. And as you watch it, think about what are some of the healthy and unhealthy behaviors that you see as you watch that. So that's one example, something that you could do if you're having trouble thinking of what some of these relationships behaviors are in relationships. Another tool I'm going to show you to help kind of think through what healthy behaviors are in relationships is this tool. This is the heart of relationships. So we know that relationships are complicated, and sometimes they can be kind of like a puzzle, and we have to try to figure out how all the pieces work together. We know with a puzzle, if a piece is missing, it's not complete, right? The puzzle's not done until all the pieces are in there. So a healthy relationship is kind of the same way. If one of these pieces is missing in a relationship, it might not be a healthy relationship. And something might need to be worked on or talked about. It might not mean that the relationship needs to end, but something should be worked on, and a conversation should be had. And if 3 or 4 or all of the pieces are missing in a relationship, then it might be a relationship that you just want to end. And that's not easy to do either. Whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship or a family relationship, ending relationships is hard, and you might want to work with someone to help you figure that out. But anyways, these 5 pieces. So with them, in the first one, it says, in my relationships, I get to be myself. So I can be me. If I like to wear my hair a certain way, I can wear my hair a certain way, and that's cool. If I like to, thinking about the clothes I like to wear, or the things I like to do, or the words I like to say, like, I get to be me. Sometimes I think of me as I'm a very unique person. I'm a little odd at times, and I love that about myself. And it's important for me that in my relationships, in healthy relationships, people are okay with me being weird and odd, and I love it. The other one at the top says we take time to get to know each other. So we didn't just meet somebody and then all of a sudden it's our best friend or our romantic partner, and we tell them everything. It takes time. The tricky thing about time is there's not a rule as to how long it takes to become a friend, a best friend, or how long it takes to become a romantic partner. It's different for everyone, and it's different with all relationships that we have. So with one of your best friends, you might have gotten to know each other over a couple months, and then you just really, really hit it off. For another one of your best friends, it might have taken 5 years. So it's different for everyone. The middle piece in here says there's compromise in my relationships. We take turns. So important that we take turns. If one person is always in charge, not a healthy relationship. That's not fair. That's where that power, control, those dynamics come from. And we want to make sure that each person has the power and control in the relationship. And so sometimes I like to think of it kind of like a balance or a scale. You know how there's two of them, and if one person is making all the decisions, then it goes like this. And that's not even. We want to make sure that it's even. If one person chooses a Friday night dinner, then the next week the other person gets to choose. If we're thinking about movies, maybe someone chooses a movie one week, another one chooses a movie the next week. For me, I don't like scary movies. So for me, it might not be as much about taking turns, because I don't know that I'd ever want the turn to be a scary movie. So I'd want that relationship to have compromise, where they want a scary movie, I want a funny movie. So maybe instead we watch a drama or something like that. So finding something totally different. The other two, we get along and have fun together. Now, an important thing to remember is it's not all fun and games. Healthy relationships have arguments in them. Normal, very, very normal. But they're probably not violent arguments, and the arguments they will end peacefully, and then we can move on. And just overall, I just enjoy being with this person and we have fun together. You don't have to like everything that the other person likes. That's not necessary. But overall, we have enough in common, and we can do this together. And the last one in here, so important, probably the most important of all of these, is that boundaries are respected. I can say no in my relationships, and the other person isn't going to end the relationship if I say no, or they're not going to be mad if I say no. It could be that they're bummed out, but they'll get over it, right? It's okay. Being bummed out is another part of healthy relationships, right? It's not all fun and games. It's work. I'm guessing that a lot of you over these past several months have had a lot of challenges in relationships, because during a pandemic, this is really tough. We've got a lot of feelings and things, and we are bummed out a lot. I want to see this person, I can't. And so it's tough. But so overall, so it's a nice tool for you to think about when you're trying to figure out what a healthy relationship looks like, or could look like, or feel like. Any questions or anything you want to add, Leah? Did anything come up?
Yeah, I was mostly, just kind of thinking about, I think you tied this in nicely, but just, how the pandemic is really changing a lot of kind of all of these things, boundaries, how long it might take for you to get to know someone right now. Maybe you just met somebody right before the pandemic, and how long before you get to see them again, or there's just a lot of different, I get to be myself. A lot of us are struggling with feeling like ourselves right now, and kind of feeling, lots of different pieces. So I like that you tied that in, because I was definitely thinking about that as you were talking.
Yeah. Great. So I want to move now to thinking about boundaries. We've kind of been talking a lot about boundaries as we've gone through this, but I want to put a definition out there that is pretty concrete. So a boundary is a line that other people cannot cross without our permission. So I have this little silly picture on the bottom ignore it. It's kind of dumb, but it just kind of shows how there's this boundary between people. So sometimes I like to think about a boundary as when we think about a line, like thinking about there's actually a line all the way around me. Like maybe I'm standing and there's a line of blue tape surrounding me on the ground. And like people can't cross that line and come into my boundary, into my space, unless I give them permission. But that I have to also remember that I can't go into their space, into their boundary line without their permission. And sometimes that can be so frustrating. I know with family that can be tough. You know, with a child or a parent, or, you know, sometimes those boundaries are crossed without permission, and it's not fair. That it's not okay. Even if it's family, we need to make sure that there's always permission, there's always consent. I'm going to show you one last video. This is the last one I'm going to show right now, that talks a little bit more about this. I'm going to make it bigger. Here we go.
We've been getting a lot of questions about boundaries lately. Could you help us out and explain what are boundaries and how do we respect them? Sure. Yeah, a boundary is a line that we don't want others to cross. So it could be a physical boundary in terms of touch and personal space, or it could be more of an emotional boundary in terms of topics or actions that are off limits for us. Does everyone have the same boundaries? No. We have different boundaries depending on person to person, place to place. My boundaries at work may be different than my boundaries at home. My boundaries can change from day to day. How do you know what other people's boundaries are? You have to ask. It's important to ask what someone's boundary is, and then also to wait and listen for their response. Setting boundaries takes a lot of practice, and so it's important that we spend some time listening to our bodies and thinking through what our needs are and what we want in terms of boundaries for ourselves.
Okay, so just a couple of things to note from that video is that our boundaries can change. So first of all, it's sometimes hard to figure out what your boundaries are. And then if we know that, oh, I've figured it out, now they can change. That can be so frustrating because, oh, I finally have this figured out. This is what my boundary is. And I'm okay with this kind of touch, but not with this. But, oh man, it's going to change. It's going to change with our mood. I think we've talked a little bit about this already. It's going to change from person to person. It's going to change from place to place, where we are physically. And so we need to start practicing to figure out what, and when I say practice, I just mean think about think about how you're feeling when you're in different boundary situations. So just think about what your body is telling you. What do you feel in your heart? Is your heart racing when maybe someone is a little too close? That's your body telling you something. Are your hands starting to sweat or get a little shaky? That's your body telling you something. Let's see. The other thing that I just want to note from that video is they mentioned that the only way that we're going to know what another person's boundary is if we ask. And that's the only way they're going to know what our boundary is we have to have a conversation. We have to talk about it. This is really important in romantic relationships. We need to make sure we're talking about what our boundaries are and what we're comfortable with, and constantly asking permission, asking for consent. And just remembering that the boundaries, just because we okayed a boundary, I mentioned this before with consent, but just because we okayed it with a person, whether it's romantic or a work or family, that doesn't mean it's always okay for that kind of touch. We always have to ask permission. Sometimes I've had people ask, well, what if it's like my parents? Like, what if it's my mom? I mean, my mom, she can give me a hug or whatever. And it's like, okay, but she still needs to ask permission. Like, that's fine. If that's okay, or maybe that's something that you and your mom talk about and you decide, like, I'm always okay with it. But I still think like people sometimes don't want the hugs, and we just really need to make sure that we're always asking about these boundaries and crossing the boundaries. Any questions about that? Or anything you want to add, Leah? Anything that came up with you or with in the chat box?
I'm just in the chat box talking about thinking about this presentation along with ideas about resilience, resiliency. That being
Yeah. I think resiliency is definitely
15 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Resiliency is a learned thing. It's not just something that we have. It takes practice. It takes time. Some days we're going to be really good, and some days it's really hard, and we're not going to be able to just like get back up and try again. It takes practice. It takes time. And so I think, we're actually shifting now to think about how other resources and how we can support you and any other questions you have. So if you want to send them, but I guess the last thing I just want to say as we shift into that is that, I probably said it again, already, is that all of this takes practice and not to be too hard on yourself.
Catie, there is a specific question for you.
Okay.
So what is a healthy way to express to someone that your boundaries have changed from what they may be used to? That's a really good question.
Really good, really good question. As much as you can, use your words to explain. And I think in a healthy relationship, so if we just go back to this, you get to be you get to choose, right? And in a healthy relationship, you get to share with that person, hey, so this is the boundary that we used to have. Like, we used to be okay with hugs all the time. I've had some things happen in my life, or you don't even need to say that. Like, these days, I just feel like I don't really want that type of touch right now. I need to do a handshake or an elbow or something like that. And that's when the boundaries are respected tool comes into play, and that it's okay to change the boundaries and to say no to those types of boundaries in a healthy relationship. And if that person doesn't respect you, it might be someone that maybe end that relationship, because it's not fair that other people wouldn't respect your boundaries. But we need to make sure that we're using our words and telling people that that's what's gonna help the most, for sure. Any other questions or anything else, Leah, that you want to add?
There's been a little bit more kind of just discussion about people with autism when they're coming forward to like report. This kind of goes back to the video, but like coming forward to report any kind of like sexual harassment, sexual assault, that there are lots of layers of whether people are believed or not.
Yeah, that's a really tough thing. So when we talk about those safety rules, and so we can go back to that. But when we think about the safety rules, and the last safety rule that we talk about is to tell someone, and it's just really important to remember that often people are not believed. That does not make it okay, but it means that if that person doesn't believe you, then we have to tell somebody else. And if that person doesn't believe you, then you have to tell somebody else. Sometimes we like to think about a safety network of 5. So, 5, like our hand, right? We've got 5 fingers. Well, most of us have 5 fingers. So with that, I have these 5 people that I can rely on. And, if one doesn't believe me, I go on to the next, and then the next, and then the next, and then the next. And hopefully within that safety network of 5, one of those people will believe you and help you to find some support and resources. I also know that with the Greater Chattanooga Aspies group, you have a lot of support here. And so I think that can be another place that you can reach out to, and you will be believed. But it is tough. And one thing that I know, autism or not, disability or not, it's hard for someone to share if someone assaulted or abused or touched them in a way that made them feel uncomfortable. It's not an easy thing for anyone to do, disability or not. And so most of the time when people do share, just side note for all of us to remember, is that they are telling the truth. It's very uncommon that people would not tell the truth when they're actually coming forward and telling it. So just something that we all know. You have us as resources. So like as we move forward, just thinking about some resources, go onto our website, sexualityforallabilities.com, and sign up for our newsletter. And then you'll just at least have an email, and you can look on our site for a phone number. You can call us. Like, we're here to support you for sure. And we don't have the answer to everything, you know, and going back to that first slide, we are not perfect, but we can help find another resource and get you connected with somebody else that can help you, or the resources that you need to answer your question. So please reach out for us. I also put on here our YouTube channel. We have a lot of videos about sexual education and different topics. And they're really short videos, like 60-second videos about all different types of topics. And you saw a couple of them today. So please check that out if that's of interest to you. I did just finish a book, which I'm super excited about. It looks like this. This is my book. So excited. I mean, I don't know, just telling you, writing a book it's hard. But we're here, and so I'm so excited to shout it out. But it's for teaching and discussing sexual health in special education. And so if you know teachers or whatever, you can pass that along, but could also be helpful in other settings for sure. A couple other resources that are some of our favorites. Planned Parenthood has a glossary of terms that you can click on there. Really great things there. So if there's words that confuse you or unsure about something, that's a great resource. And then the National Council on Independent Living has put out some sex ed videos for and by people with IDD. Great videos, really, really great stuff. And these are just on this one slide, these are just a few of so many resources. So please reach out if you're like, hey, I'm looking for a resource about blah, blah, blah. And then we'll send, we'll share a book that we know about, or a podcast, or something else that we know about. So with that, I'm just wondering, we have 9 more minutes. Just wondering if there's any other questions or comments that people, anything in the chat box, Leah?
Just saying that, Greater Chattanooga, they do have a policy and people who they contact to report abuse and harassment, and that they have a system for that. So that's so awesome. So you have there's people you can go to, and that there will be follow-up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Let's see. I do, just thinking about just one last thing about people, is remembering that we are all vulnerable in different ways. So I think it's tough. We know that education and conversations like these can really help to empower us and to not make us as vulnerable. But we know that sometimes when someone has an invisible disability, for example, it can make them very vulnerable in a different way than someone with Down syndrome, for example, that looks like they have a disability. And I also know that there are times when people with disabilities might be kind of taken advantage of, and then all of a sudden they become the perpetrator and the predator and get into trouble because of someone taking advantage of them, or maybe because they didn't have the education on boundaries and safety that could have helped them to not get in that tricky situation. So again, just if you have questions for us, reach out and we can support you with all of that. So let's see, anything else? Any other questions?
Yes, there is. So,
oh yeah, the resource. Oh, someone just said, can you put the resources back up on the screen? Yes, I can.
Yes.
There we go.
Okay. So some autistic folks fall for friends and romantic relationships fast and hard. Any advice on how to not let our feelings control us in these situations? Ooh, can you also let me know about that?
I know, right?
Yeah, it's so hard.
It's so hard. And like some like big feelings are amazing, and horrible too. I mean, big feelings are really tough. And so that's a really tricky thing. And I think it's just keep reminding yourself of that. If you're aware of that, and that is you can stop and remind yourself, hey, hold on. Now let's go back to that rule that Catie talked about. It takes time to get to know people. And so maybe you create your own little rule, and your rule is something like, okay, I'm going to have 5 face-to-face conversations with this person before I go to the next level with them, or something.
5 minutes. Just letting you know, 5 minutes.
Perfect.
If you go over a little bit, that's okay. But
okay.
5 minutes.
Sounds great. Anything else you want to add on that, Leah? It's so tough.
I was thinking too, it's so hard right now with the pandemic too. Like we've gotten so many questions lately about like dating during the pandemic. And I feel like that is like a whole nother set of boundaries that you have to figure out, like what's safe for you, what's safe for your family or whoever you're living with right now, what is that person's safety boundaries right now too. And so I think that and also, like, to be honest, like things kind of suck right now. So like when you do have a crush or you do start to like someone, it feels really big because you're like, oh, finally a feeling that isn't awful. I might be editorial.
Totally.
How I feel about the pandemic right now.
Yeah, right.
But I do think that like, yeah, I think that's a good point, that if there are ways that you can personally set a goal of like, I'm going to, chat with this person for a few weeks online. We're going to have some like FaceTime conversations. Maybe we'll meet outside at a park. If you can kind of come up with, and think about it more as like a safety plan right now, that might be helpful with some of those boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So someone just said, you keep saying we reach out to you, where and how. So I put our contact us on here. So my phone number is there. So sometimes it's nice to know that you just have a phone number of someone you can call. Email obviously is best, but you can definitely call me. It's totally great. But there's our email addresses, our website, Sexuality for All Abilities. So just signing up. So if you sign up for the newsletter, that can just be, we send out about a once a month email. And that could just be a monthly reminder that, hey, we're here. So you can just reply to those emails if you have questions or whatever. And then, of course, all the like social media stuff at the bottom. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, that stuff. The stuff that I don't know a lot about, but people seem to. So that's all there. Let's see. Any last things? So we got like 2 more minutes. This was, I'm so grateful to all of you for being here and just finding the importance of you, just like taking care of you. Like you're here learning about this so that you can have safe and appropriate boundaries. And that is really, really wonderful. And hard, to take this time for you. And so I applaud you. Nice. I'm so glad you're all here. So I know that there will be access to the PowerPoint, which then could link you to videos as well as have our contact info. And anything else that you need from us, just send an email or whatever. And we'll be in touch with you. So with that, I think I would like to close with 3 breaths with the breathing ball, because I know sometimes, we know a lot of the time this can bring up stuff. So let's let it all go now before you head off to your next thing. So sitting up tall, take a deep breath in, let it out. Breath in and out. One last breath. And then let everything go. All right. Thank you all so much. This was really fun to be here today with you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
All right, thank you, Catie. Thank you, Leah. Thank you for your presentation today. I think you have already gone over how many different ways people can get in touch with you. So, I mean, I could say it again. The information will be on our website at gcaspies.org. And yes, thank you for taking the time to present with us. And attendees are welcome to take a 15-minute break. Actually, actually it'll be even maybe 16 minutes. And then we'll come back at 2:45 for the entrepreneurship panel with Jonathan. So thank you very, very much. And we'll see you back here in a little bit. Okay, welcome back. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So we are here for our third presentation and final presentation for today. We will be starting again tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock with more presentations tomorrow morning, but this is it for today. Before we begin, I would like to remind you again that the Q&A box is being monitored for questions. I think people are figuring this out, so good job. Thanks everybody for sending in questions. The questions will be asked towards the end of the presentation. Any unanswered questions can be sent to the presenter or presenters, and the presentation materials, including the email addresses for the presenters, can be found at gcaspes.org. So I would like to introduce our next presenter, our entrepreneurship panel, led by Jonathan Sharp, who's the moderator, and they will introduce themselves today. So take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonathan Sharp. I am the moderator of the entrepreneur panel today. My personal story is that I was diagnosed at Duke in 1995. I have 2 associate degrees, both with honors. One is in hotel restaurant management and one is in accounting. I have a small bookkeeping business. I also have started a support group for adults with autism that has recently merged with GCA. I also have a couple of other ventures in the background. Personally, I am single, and my special interests are elevators, freeways, and dachshunds. I'm going to turn it over to Catie Beaulieu. We're going to go in alphabetical order for introductions, and every one of you have about 3 minutes to introduce themselves. Go ahead, Catie.
Thanks, Jonathan. I just got really nervous. That's okay, though. Okay, so I'm Catie Beaulieu. I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor. They just changed our job titles, so that's why I can't remember right off the top of my head. I was diagnosed a couple years ago, I think. It totally changed my life, just got me more like accepting of myself and my quirks. I run a private practice, which is a sole proprietorship as a psychotherapist. I also run a training studio, and then I'm part of a professional limited liability corporation with a group of therapists where we do trainings on Gestalt therapy, which is my special interest. And I run a nonprofit also for minority identified therapists, and to link them with minority identified clients. And I'm here because last year I wanted to see some more diversity, and I'm like, well, I guess I can be the part of the diversity. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Catie. I'll move on to Antonio. Antonio, go ahead and give your bio, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Antonio Blazevic, and I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. Even though my shirt says Star Wars, I'm more of a Trekkie, so live long and prosper. I own Neurodiversity Advisors, which is a for-profit corporation in which we aim to match autistic individuals with jobs. And I'm also a geographer, so I do some geography map making work and fly drones on the side. My interest, I'm more on the supplier diversity side and how to use like diversity certifications to gain to get into corporations. Love airplanes, of course, commercial. And I got diagnosed with autism a couple of years ago. So, you know, even in your 40s, you can still get diagnosed.
Thank you, Antonio. I'm going to move to Michael Coyne. Michael, if you could please give your bio.
Hi, I'm Michael. I own Red, White, and Brew, and I have autism, ADHD, and bipolar. And I also work for the Developmental Disability Council in Warwick. And we have over 40 vendors at my place that have disabilities and that do not have disabilities. And I have 3 products from 3 vendors that I want to show. So this is my buddy Jason. Earrings. He makes those by hand. My friend Norm, who does honey. And another mother-son business. The son has a disability, and their name is We Be Jammin'. And they're actually one of our top sellers. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Let's go ahead and move on to Taylor Duncan. Taylor, if you could give your bio, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Taylor Duncan, and I am CEO, Director, Commissioner of Alternative Baseball Organization, where we provide an authentic baseball experience for teens and adults ages 15 years of age and older with autism and other disabilities. And I was diagnosed myself on the autism spectrum and decided after years of not having the same opportunities as other peers that I want to pass off my positive experiences to others just like myself. And now we've gone from one small group in greater Atlanta to now we're in 25 different states, including Louisville, Antonio. We just signed Louisville today. So we're very excited to, I'm very excited to be here with y'all, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Taylor. Now we move, last but not least, to Eric Zimmerman. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Eric D. Zimmerman. I'm founder and technical director of the Buddy Project. So what we do is we take computers and we provide them to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and we use people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to refurbish them, and we sell them to raise money for the organization. I've been at this for going on 13 years, and I'm 32 years old, and I am married. And I was diagnosed on the autism spectrum in high school. I was diagnosed a little late because I'm higher functioning. The school system kind of, they knew that I was in special ed, and they knew, but they didn't exactly know. And so it's sad because I missed out on a lot of things, but everything kind of happened for a reason. And I really enjoy what I do for work. And my hobbies are, I'm really into racing, car racing, and I like to travel. I do a lot of autism awareness speaking. So yeah, that's me. And I enjoy surgery as well.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. We're going to talk about a few different topics today. This forum is going to be a little bit more informal than the other forums that we had today, in the fact that we're not going to have a PowerPoint, and that we're just going to talk about certain things. And I do let everyone know, attendees, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom to ask us questions, which we will answer at the end. And panelists and staff, you can use the chat button to ask us questions. One of the things I want to discuss are the advantages and disadvantages to self-employment. There are plenty of advantages in the fact that you don't have a boss breathing down your neck. You get to set your own hours. You have less stress. You don't have the office politics and the gossip of an office or a workplace. There's a little bit less stress. There's a little bit more freedom. The downside is you have what are called hidden bosses, which are your clients or your customers. You got to make sure you make most of those happy. Then you have, if you have a home office or you work from home, you have to make sure that you spend time actually working and forget about the bed that's only 10 feet or couch that's only 10 feet away from you. I was blessed for many years to have an office I could go to work in where I didn't have those comforts. And also, you need to always have a good bookkeeping system to make sure that you're making enough money, that you're profitable enough to support yourself or support the goals that you want. And you also have to make sure all your records are taken care of. And another couple of pluses, you can control how much you earn. If you don't want to earn enough to trigger a loss in Social Security benefits, you can do that. And also, that self-employment can also lead to regular employment, as it has recently done for me. Are there any other topics that, let's start with Catie. Are there any topics that you'd like to discuss?
Nothing calls to me just to discuss. I'm definitely open to answering what questions people have.
Okay. How about Antonio? Is there something you want to discuss?
Well, I actually would like to know what kind of businesses the attendees have or are wanting to start, and that would be kind of a good starting point, so we could kind of tailor our discussions to what their needs are.
Yes, and don't be shy, attendees. We've been here before and done all that. So just go ahead and share with us. I can also share some types of businesses for both people who need less support and those who need more support. People who need less support, there's a lot of skilled trades out there. There's also medical billing and coding and bookkeeping and stuff like that. And like Michael did, open a restaurant or a coffee shop. There's things like that. And there's also, like Taylor and Eric did, opening a nonprofit. Just because you're a nonprofit does not mean you don't get to pay yourself. You just got to be careful. They saw a need in the community that was unmet, and they met it. And that is for people who need more support, there's things like there's a real lack in people to do alterations to clothing right now. So if you could learn to be an alterations person and do work on clothing like hemming or putting on buttons or something like that, that's something that's really lacking in today's communities. Wash and fold attendant at a laundromat is one that comes to mind. Call the owners of your laundromat. See if they're willing to let you run a wash and fold service there. You might have to sweeten the pot and say, I'm willing to clean your laundromat for free for you if you let me run my wash and fold business. And that would be the only payment you would get. For younger folks, Temple Grandin even mentioned that, the people that would be paper boys back in her day now are doing websites or PowerPoints or drafting documents or spreadsheets. All these can be monetized. And then there's crafts. There's arts and crafts. As Michael showed, there was a guy who made the earrings and the jewelry. There is a market for that, and that can be monetized. Let me move on to Michael. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
No, not really.
Okay, how about you, Taylor?
I think you pretty much all got it covered. I definitely want to hear the types of businesses that those in the room are wanting to start and that they're involved in themselves. And I want to see as many questions as possible.
Yes, definitely. How about you, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is right on. There's different ways to make money and control the amount of money you bring in, and also you can do a service to the community to help others, and also take the salary or take some type of compensation. So there's plenty of ways. You just got to be creative to start your own business or nonprofit, and it's nice because you have your own schedule and your own comforts.
It could be something, now all the attendees, it could be something as simple as setting up a flea market. There's a guy, an older guy that he doesn't have autism, but he's a veteran. He cleans out spaces for people. He cleaned out stuff at the self-storage for us when I worked there. And he sold the stuff that was resellable and threw away the stuff that was not resellable. And he's developed relationships with people all across our area. And the deal I had with him is you get to come in and you get to get the stuff for free. I'm not going to pay you, but you get the stuff for free. And the catch is you have to take it all, good and bad. And it's always been to his benefit. So even something as simple as that, and me having experience in self-storage, you can get inventory by going to storage auctions and bidding on units. Some of these units go for $5, and you can make profit that way. You know, there's different things for different people to do. I will say that it is almost impossible for someone with autism to get an actual job, especially if they don't have any experience backing them up. Even if they have a degree, it's almost impossible for someone with autism to get a regular W-2 type job. And we, I do have a question here. What advice would you give someone on the spectrum that you would like to start their own business? That would, let me see, and there's another question. Okay, I'll get back to that question here in just a minute. Let me, anyone want to answer Jamie's question about what advice you'd give to someone in the spectrum?
I would say be focused, you know, be focused on what you want to do and really get your, you know, executive functioning skills is definitely an advantage of having when starting a business. You really got to be organized, have all your ducks in a row, and that's really one of the big advice, and actually one of my biggest problems is with running a business is the executive functioning side of things.
Right. Another thing I would mention is that start out slow. Even if you're earning $500 a year, I mean, that's still $500 in profit that you're earning. Start out slow and work your way up. If you only have one client, as long as you have Social Security income or other income coming in, that's okay. That's okay. Now, let me go ahead and go to the Q&A. Okay.
I've got something to add. I've got something to
Sorry,
add,
go ahead.
if you don't mind
go ahead.
Well, it's all about having the passion and about not only having the skills exactly, but having the passion, having the dream, having whatever it is that you want to go after and trying to go after it. It just takes that first step. But all the work is really worth it when you really enjoy what you do. And to me, alternative baseball is not necessarily a job. I mean, it's my life. I mean, I have fun with it every single day, and I learn every single day from what I do.
Thank you, Taylor. Is there anyone else that wants to talk about that question before I move on to the next question?
I second that. If you enjoy what you do, you don't work a life in your work a day in your life. You enjoy what
Exactly.
you do.
Exactly. Okay, I have a question from the Q&A. There is a lot of talk about integrated employment, and what do you think of that term? How do y'all define integrated employment? Sounds like you all have developed your own integrated employment. Let me answer that. I want to answer that partially. Sometimes it's not integrated at all. Sometimes it's just us Aspies. and I'm perfectly okay with that. Sometimes integration is necessary, and other times it's not. There is the masking that goes on, but if people aren't comfortable with me, they can go somewhere else. And that's something that you can't do with a traditional W-2 job. But that's my take on that. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have something interesting to say. Yeah, most of everyone here that works with me as a volunteer or is on the autism spectrum. But yeah, integrated employment to me means being integrated with the peers that are do not have disabilities or they're neurotypical individuals, and that meaning being included and everything, and that means a lot to some people. But one thing I have interest in say is I have someone I was looking to hire to come in and assist me with some administrative duties, and only like 8 hours a week. And this girl, she's probably about 20, 21 years old, and she works with you locally night away. And I told her about what we do and what I need help with, and she says people with autism. She says, are they nice? I never worked around people with autism. So, everyone's here is nice. I explained to her what autism is, and she's like, "Oh, okay." But she was afraid to come and work for me because of that.
Okay, I have Catie, but Catie wants to wave her hand and ask a question or answer a question. Go ahead, Catie.
Are you talking to me?
Yes. Dave said that you wanted to wave your hand answering one of the questions.
Oh, it was a while back. Oh, I think I wanted to challenge the notion of executive functioning and running a business. My executive functioning, although I can fake it really well to the outside world, like it seems like I'm highly organized to a lot of people. I am not at all. So I will say, like, not only have I been able to like kind of manipulate the system to like figure out how to executive function. I know this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in my head. I feel like I've been able to like cultivate, and I don't know if this touches on integrative employment at all, but like people in my life with disabilities, with autism or not, to help with certain processes. And sometimes I've paid them for their help. Like right now, privileged enough to pay somebody to like do all the invoicing, to make the phone calls to people to ask like, hey, why haven't you paid yet? Because I just can't do it. Like I can't do it. And so I think there are ways and small business associations that do things for free or can connect you. If your executive functioning is not the greatest, there is support out there. That's all I want to.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that.
Okay, let me check the Q&A right quick. No Q&A, no chat as of right now. We don't bite people. Come on. We have a lot of stuff to share.
Jonathan, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
Okay. Up earlier in the chat, there was just a note. It said, this is for the group. It says, prior to opening your own businesses, were each of you working other jobs? And if so, what were they? And were they linked to the employment that you all have now?
I
guess,
have
can I
had
start?
Go ahead, Taylor.
Sure. Well, before I started Alternative Baseball, really I ran some sort of an eBay business where I would go to Goodwill and get stuff to really resell. But after that, I just felt like I had a much higher passion and something much more to give. And I really wanted to utilize my passion as much as I could to serve as many as I possibly could. Now, going back to the other question, I did raise my hand up. I know I'm technically supposed to do that, but I'll go ahead and answer the other one simultaneously while I'm on the microphone too. As I was on several news stations across the country, it got so much to the point where the demand got so high for volunteering during the pandemic that I've had to start organizing my time by using the Calendly software, whereas I use a template to send out to those interested in coaching, as well as those reporters interested in news articles across the country. And I said, I try to make everything as easy as I possibly can. Pick the best date and time that is best for you, and we'll go from there. And usually it sends a Zoom link already sent to them, and everything's all ready to go. That's how I best organize and trying to digitize it as much as I can. But I also keep some things on paper because you never know when electronic system's going to crash.
Exactly. Is there anyone else that wants to respond to that? Because I've got another question from one of the staff about controlling the amount of money that you can make. And I have to sort of give a primer on SSA and stuff.
Yeah, I can chime in, and I also don't have to. I spoke in the last session.
Okay, let me answer this question. Somebody was talking about controlling the amount of money you make. Social Security allows you, it depends on whether you're drawing SSI or SSDI. You're allowed to make a certain amount of money without jeopardizing your benefits with Social Security. And depending on which program you're with, is what those thresholds are. And I do recommend you reach out to a company like Benefits to Work or even the Social Security website and type in trial work period, TWP or SGA in the current year, and that will tell you. SGA stands for Substantial Gainful Activity. That is the upper limit that if you make more than that from work, they stop your check. So, and another thing I want to mention is when you're self-employed, Social Security looks at net income, not gross income, like they do with if you're employed by someone. So net income means the total income you come in minus whatever expenses you have for the business. So it's actually more advantageous to be self-employed. Anyone have anything to add to that? Well, let's see here. Let's see here. What else can we talk about? Anyone just have something that we want to talk about? Otherwise,
Sure. I'll bring something up.
Go ahead.
Really, when you have this grand vision, it's not just limited to your local community. Often-wise, there are other areas and other communities around your community that could also be served as well. So think of it as start small, but think big, and definitely live large with your vision. Do everything you can and try to really break those glass ceilings and be the best that you can possibly be at it as well.
Thank you, Taylor. Yeah, think globally, act locally is one of the mantras that we always hear today, and
definitely.
And the global will come as time comes.
And often too, when we're all doing the best we can possibly do and giving others like ourselves more opportunities, then we are truly powering through those perceptions. That's our mantra here at Alternative Baseball. It's powering through perceptions because there's so many negative stigmas, so many negative perceptions. And we not only want to prove them wrong, but we want to have fun doing it too. Okay. That's the big thing as well.
All right, thank you. The other, Dave was letting me know that that I need to know, or I don't need to know, I'd like to know what everybody's experience with employment is. So leading them to self-employment. I will start with Catie, and then Antonio, then Michael, then Taylor, then Eric. So go ahead.
Just generally what my experience with employment is?
Yes.
Okay. I've been working since I was 14. I started detasseling corn in the corn fields. I thought that was a good idea at the time. And then I like worked a lot of food service jobs like in high school. And then I kept wanting more, and I worked in like as an outdoor guide for a little bit. And then I went to school for business, and I learned that I can't fully fake executive functioning. So I joined, or I switched my degree to counseling. And so in terms of like transitioning from working for people to working to myself or for myself, I am fully self funded or financially reliant. I don't know what the word is. I think you know what I'm saying. But I had a full-time job working as a therapist, and then I worked over the 40 hours. 40 is probably like 55 hours a week. But over that to start my own practice, because I didn't want to go in and then just not have any clients and then starve to death. And so I just kind of transitioned into private practice, and then I kept backing out my hours. And then I found they were like, you got to work 30 hours a week at least. And I was like, well, my practice is taking off. So then I went and found a different part-time job and then backed off there. And then when I had X amount of clients, and I set this goal ahead of time, then I went fully into self-employment. Yeah, that's it. You're muted, Jonathan.
I'm going to go ahead and let Michael speak for a second because he hasn't gotten to speak much, and I apologize for that.
Yeah, it's all right.
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I have actually been looking for jobs for 4 years. Mainly in the food service industry. I tried applying pretty much 4 years straight with a restaurant that I volunteered at, and I was never like, I always was on time. I called in if I was sick, never a no-show. So me and my mom thought, oh, he's gonna get that job like nothing. Nope, not at all. And for the first 3 years I was applying, the manager was a family friend. So that's what really hurt. That's pretty much it.
And I would like to mention that how I found out about you was through national news, and you're doing something awesome there, Michael, and thank you for what you're doing.
No problem.
Sorry I had to skip over you, Antonio. I'm going to go back to you. Are you there, Antonio?
I'm sorry, I have my mic muted. Yeah, you have an amazing story there, Michael. I mean, what you're doing is fantastic. There's maybe some supplier diversity things that might be of value to you. But as far as like employment goes, I still not, I still got a lot of work to do with my business. So I'm not like, doesn't support me. I have a job, work full time for the 2020 census. So I'm a supervisor there. I have to, supervise other IT people. And I like it. I love it. I held various jobs in the government as a geographer. I even worked for the police department one time, which really wasn't not a good experience at all. So it really depends on who your supervisor is. A lot of supervisors I have, and actually the one I have in the Census Bureau, he's actually on the spectrum. So he's also autistic. So, sometimes you do, I have experienced some discrimination, maybe with my quirks, or, might be all bright-eyed and, jumping all around and be all happy doing my work. I get my job done. That's the way I approach things. And sometimes I have gotten discriminated against because I wasn't a cheerful employee, you know what I mean? But other jobs, you know, they bless you and they really, you know, give you a lot. So, you know, just because you have like one bad job, you know, I mean, the next job could be fantastic. You know, you have that right supervisor that will give you the time and will, you know, show you a lot of good things. You know, that's the one you got to shoot for.
Thank you, Antonio. I'm also testament to that. I was in the hotel industry for years, and let me tell you, that industry is so cutthroat, it's unreal. I mean, everybody, supervisors, co-workers are wanting to take your place and get rid of you, even if your place is no good. So just go on to the next job, even if it is self-employment, and there's always someone better out there. Taylor, go ahead.
Yes, definitely. So actually, my whole thing with employment has actually gone in the reverse direction. It came after I started, oops, I accidentally pressed the mute button there. It came after I started alternate baseball when I connected with those with Umpire Association. Eventually, the head honcho, the head boss of the Umpire Association gave me the training so I could see that side of the baseball game for the first time as well. And guess what? I get paid pretty good to do it as well. Yeah, I have to deal with a lot of coaches who've yelled in my face in the past, but you know what? It's worth it because I learned so much that I could apply into real life as well. And you're going to have customers that pretty much scream in your face too. So why not go ahead and get a good taste of that from actual umpiring first before you actually go national as well. And then for the first time this fall, I got accepted to Toccoa Falls College to continue my education toward the nonprofit management and with a minor in sports management, so that not only can I continue expanding across the United States, but to be able to have the knowledge to take it internationally, because we've had those from Canada, Mexico, South Korea, and Japan that also want to be served there. So it's important to know what to do in those areas to be able to effectively and efficiently expand to those areas and do a good job serving those people there too.
Thank you. Eric, is there anything else you want to add?
About employment, how, like, my employment, I used to work for another nonprofit before I started this nonprofit, and that was probably one of the better jobs I had. That I was actually working for a boss. It was a disability nonprofit, so they understood how to work with me. But before that, I worked in kind of like fast food. I worked in like at Pizza Hut, and it really wasn't a good experience. I was discriminated against. You know, a lot of rude employees, and they have their cliques and whatnot. They want to stick together. At one point, someone tried to have me sign a document, a blank document. It was a write-up. It was yeah, and so they tried to get me to do that one time, and but yeah, it was just not good. I didn't enjoy it.
One thing I'm gonna do these last two questions in our last little bit. One is about networking, how we do networking, and the other is do any of you have employees and how do you deal with them? How many of you have been supervisors? I personally have not had much supervisory authority, but let's start with the networking. Yeah. Anyone want to chime in about networking?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'd say network. LinkedIn is one of the best networks that you can possibly find to connect with as many people as you possibly can. Whether it's over in Tokyo, whether it's Atlanta, whether it's Chattanooga, or whether it's probably all the way up in Alaska too. I mean, you could connect with just about anybody that has shared interest or similar interest. And a lot of media contacts are now using LinkedIn as well, especially on the national side. And that's how I figured out how to contact people like Craig Melvin from the Today Show and those who work for ESPN. That's how we got our coverage. We got rejected about 25 times, but it was all that one yes that mattered the most. And we didn't quit networking until we had something happen, and we're still doing it now. And the best thing about that is too, when somebody tells you no, I mean, you always go to the next person over, and they might give you that one yes that you need to help make something happen. Now, about the volunteer, about the supervisor question, we don't have any other employees other than myself, but in these local areas, we do have volunteer coach managers, and what they do is sign an agreement where basically they agree to hold all the standards of the national organization. So kind of like where you go to a McDonald's, all the McDonald's in the world are going to sell Big Macs. All the Chick-fil-A's in the world are going to sell chicken sandwiches. You're not going to go to one McDonald's and see a Big Mac, and then go to another where they only sell hot dogs. So we have those volunteer coach managers to keep all those standards in place, to be able to provide the same type of experience no matter where we're at in the U.S. So we do have a lot of standards for our volunteers, but we don't have any employees.
Thank you. Anybody else want to talk about either networking or having employees? I know, Eric, you have employees.
Yeah, I have, right now I have about, 6 volunteers, about 6 volunteers. And I have to manage them all. Usually I'll have one, or I usually have one volunteer manage a few of them. And then that person direct reports to me. And then right now we're looking for more or less like an office manager on a volunteer basis, or possibly even paid. And that person would be a direct report to me. So yeah, I've had to manage people, and I've had the good and the bad sides of it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to speak about supervising and other stuff? I see, Michael, you just unmuted, so go ahead.
So right now for employment, people we have is just mainly family. So I have my cousins, my brother's girlfriend, my mom, occasionally my brother if he's not working or if he's not injured. And then I also have my support staff helping me. And then also for networking, I was actually on the Roadshow, or Allen Roadshow, for, forget what year that, I think that was last year I was on the Roadshow. And if you look closely at the video, I think it's on YouTube for the Rhode Island Disability Council. If you look closely behind the table, you can see me twiddling my thumbs because I'm so nervous. That's about it, really.
Okay, thank you. We're running out of time. We've run out of time. Let me make sure there's no other questions.
And if you don't mind, if any of you still have any questions for me after the panel is over, go on to alternativebaseball.org and use the contact form on my website, and you can type your questions there if we run out of time.
Okay.
Jonathan, you do have another question in the Q&A.
Okay, go ahead.
It says, I'd like to hear from some of the panelists about what they consider to be their biggest strengths in the workplace.
Mine are honesty, integrity, and attention to detail. We can also do weaknesses as well. You know, taking initiative when you're not supposed to and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to kind of ditto what Jonathan was saying. I mean, my biggest strengths are, you know, that more the attention to detail and initiative and drive to get things done. Weaknesses would be when I got about 10 people wanting me to do something at the same time, and trying to prioritize.
Right.
Sometimes.
Right. Aspies are poor multitaskers. Yeah, Aspies are poor multitaskers. it looks like if anyone else wants to chime in here in the last minute, if not, thank you to all the panelists. And we're all able to be reached through the website. Our email addresses are on there. And if one of the panelists' email addresses is not there, I have access to them and I can get in touch with them. I'm going to send it back over to Larissa to wrap things up today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good job, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you for presenting with us today and sharing your experiences with everyone. And I just want to remind everyone that day 2 of the 4th annual Southeast Adult Autism Symposium begins tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. Attendees will need to use the Zoom webinar link for day 2 to join the symposium. Thank you for attending day 1 of the 4th annual Southeast Adult Autism Symposium and enjoy the rest of your day.